Nuno Bettencourt is my absolute hero when it comes to rhythm guitar. His riffs are super interesting, super memorable, and they would make a lead player want to become a rhythm player. They're so good. Now, there's a problem though, because I was never able to really capture that thing that Nuno does until I discovered this amazing hack recently when I was recording something. But first things first, let's get a few things out of the way because they're really going to help you when it comes time to implement all this with a hack I'm going to share with you. I think I was 17 years old when I first discovered Nuno Bettencourt. I had borrowed this album that everyone was talking about. It was Porno Graffitti. And I borrowed it from the local library, and man, that album changed everything for me. Every single song was killer. I wanted to learn every single riff in that album. And it was really interesting because at the time, I just wanted to be a lead guitar player, and anytime I heard something, it was always lead. And I spent hours and hours trying to memorize solos, working on licks, scales, never rhythm. Because in my mind, in my typical teenage guitar hero wannabe mind, rhythm players were only rhythm players because they couldn't play lead. I was totally wrong, of course. But what was interesting about Porno Graffitti is that I didn't really care about learning the leads so much. I mean, they were great, but I really wanted to learn the rhythm guitar parts. Now, those rhythm guitar parts that Nuno played were so different than anything else I had heard before. It wasn't just chords. It was the perfect blend of chords, riffs, lead parts, and the whole thing just made the song just so cool. And I think part of the reason is that Nuno is the only guitar player in that band. And back then in the 90s, when I was thinking of hard rock bands, I was always picturing two guitar players, you know, the rhythm player and the lead player. Well, Extreme was different. They just had one player. And when you listen to Porno Graffitti, you hear that there are not that many overdubs. Nuno's playing the whole thing. So that is the first thing, really. The rhythm guitar part should stand on its own and not require anything else to sound cool. No overdubs, no lead on top of it. It was just super interesting. So for my 18th birthday, all I wanted was the official tab book from Porno Graffitti. And I got it, and I spent hours memorizing all the riffs and all the rhythm parts. I skipped all the solos. All I cared about was playing the way Nuno played. And when I'm thinking Nuno Bettencourt, I'm thinking the riffs. And that's all I did. I was freshly out of high school, started going to university for music, but I would skip the classes and stay in my car with the portable CD player of Porno Graffitti and trying to learn all those songs. And I got fairly good at knowing how to play them. I understood what he was doing. I understood how the riffs were tied to scales and how Nuno was flawlessly going from a strict, what you'd call classic rhythm playing, you know, the power chords and stuff like that, and also the licks. And I started getting into that mindset with my own things. I was in a band at the time, and we started writing our own music, and I started implementing some of that stuff. But there was always that missing piece, and I couldn't quite put my fingers on it. I didn't really know what it was until recently. I mean, it wasn't a lack of dexterity. It wasn't a lack of technique. It wasn't a lack of speed. There's just something else. I couldn't put my hands on it or my ears on it. The years passed, started writing my own music more and more, started working with other bands, and moved on to other things, musical things. But in my heart, I still had this deep love for Nuno's music. Even though I wasn't really playing that style for many years, I still really had this craving for what Nuno did. I wanted to relive the experience that I had when I was listening to Nuno play. Those first few moments when I heard Porno Graffitti, I wanted to capture that, and I always wanted to go back to it. Now, as I got better and better on the guitar, understanding scales, more techniques, and more fluency on the instrument, I always tried to get better at replicating that feeling. And again, I was never able to because I was missing a real fundamental piece to that. A few months ago, I was working on my next album, recording the rhythm guitar parts. And there's something really interesting that happens when you're actually recording something. You really get an opportunity to listen with the ears of a listener. As you're recording, you're listening and playing, but then you really have to put your guitar down and listen to the whole mix, listen to everything together. And something was different when I heard it this time. I was instantly reminded of Nuno Bettencourt, not because I was playing like him, but I was reminded of him because that rhythm section that I was playing, it did have some elements of Nuno. Again, I'm a huge fan, so it's only natural that it kind of comes out in my playing. But I was still missing that thing that I couldn't really quite put my ears on it. But this time I did. I knew what I was missing, and it was attitude. And so I went back to the Porno Graffitti album and listened to it again with fresh ears. And this time I could hear it all over the album. I heard the attitude. Now, attitude is one of these words that is really hard to describe, especially when you're talking about music. Typically, when I'm thinking of attitude, I'm thinking of something that I could see. I could see the attitude of someone. But you can also hear it. And it's hard to describe, but you hear it when it's there. And you also hear it when it's not there. All right, so how the heck do you hear attitude? Well, again, it's pretty subtle, but you hear it in the attack of the notes. You hear the aggression sometimes when someone is playing with aggression. That's what I mean by attitude. And you can actually hear it with the way that the strings are strummed with it's just stronger. And it's the thing that kind of makes you want to tap your foot. When it's there, you just can't help but tapping your foot and getting into it. And it's all because of that subtle but very important thing, is the attitude. Now, as I was thinking about that attitude thing that is hard to describe, I realized that whenever I was practicing on my own, unplugged, on my bed, I kind of had that attitude. And I also realized that the reason it came through was actually because I wasn't relying on the tone I was playing through. I wasn't relying on the distortion. In order to convey the emotion that I had when I was playing, I had to rely with what I had, which was just my pick against the strings. And that kind of forced me to just kind of dig into the strings to let that come through without an amp. And that's when I discovered the hack. I did a little experiment. I completely deleted that rhythm section that I had recorded and started again, but this time I turned my studio monitors way down, enough volume so that I could hear what I was tracking to, but also low enough so that I could hear the attack of my pick against the strings. It is a perfect mix between hearing the drums, the bass, some of the distortion that I was playing through, but also just the raw organic sound that I would get by just playing unplugged. And I felt it when I recorded it. I felt that attitude. I was tapping my foot, really getting into it. And once my parts were recorded, I put my guitar down, I turned up the volume, and I heard it. I heard that missing thing that I had been craving for so many years. It was right there in the recording. It really did make a massive difference in the sound. And it was all because of that attitude that I was able to convey by really hearing the raw, unfiltered sound of my pick against the strings. Now there's one more thing. In addition to turning your volume down, you also should really think about the positioning of your fingers, because that will help you get more attitude juice out of your playing. And I talk all about that in this video. Combine this with what we just talked about today, magic happens. I'll meet you right there.